Now it is my pleasure to turn towards this evening's conversation and introduce Yiscah and Rabbi Josh. So conducting tonight's interview is Rabbi Josh Feigelson, our wonderful president and CEO here at IJS. Josh joined us in February 2020 after serving as Dean of Students at the University of Chicago Divinity School. Josh's first book, called Eternal Questions, Reflections, Conversations, and Jewish Mindfulness Practices for the Weekly Torah Portion, was published by Ben Yehuda Press in 2022. And joining Josh tonight is Yiscah Smith, a beloved friend of IJS, a teacher sometimes on the daily sit. Yiscah is a spiritual activist, educator, mentor, and meditation guide who addresses the spiritual practice of encountering the divine spark within and beyond. Yiscah teaches Jewish contemplative practice and spiritual texts at the Pardes Institute for Jewish Studies and at Applied Jewish Spirituality. She has also founded and directs Conscious Community Nachlaot, an organization in Jerusalem that hosts Shabbat in-person spiritual gatherings, virtual guided meditation sets, and spiritual text classes. And in addition, Yiscah works with individuals in her private spiritual mentoring practice. Yiscah has earned a reputation as a sought-after, inspiring international public speaker, and just released a new book that we'll be learning about more tonight called Planting Seeds of the Divine. So as we enter into this conversation, I want to just encourage everyone to ask questions during the event. And to do so, you can just click on the chat icon on the bottom of your screen and address your questions to Q&A. And so without any further ado, I will hand it over now to Josh and Yiscah.
Thanks so much, Rebecca. Hi, Yiscah. So great to have you here.
Oh,
This is so
hi.
exciting. We were just talking in the green room beforehand about how I think it was 2 years ago, right? It was in the summer, and we were both staying at the home of um, Rabbis Miriam Klotz and Margot Stein, and we were both there, and it was the first time we'd ever met in person. And I was asking you, so when's this book coming? And because you had been, I remember you talking so much about, I'm working on the manuscript, I think it had just gotten picked up by JPS, and so like Shehechianu, what an amazing moment that we're here. It's so great,
Yeah.
so great.
Uh,
Um, and I have it up here. There you go. So I have read
I
this
have,
book.
I have it right here.
So as Rebecca said, we're going to have a few questions as we usually do on these conversations. I have some questions prepared, and then if you have questions, please address them to Q&A, and they will go to Molly, and Molly will be able to collate them and send them on to me to be able to ask Yiscah. So if you have those, please send them to Q&A, not to me personally, because I'm not going to get them. So, all right. So Yiscah, let's get started. So I know, as we said, this book has been a long time in coming. Um, just tell us about what led you to write it and publish it.
Okay. First, though, I would like to express gratitude to you, to the staff, the support at IJS. I've been a fan and a participant with IJS for many years. And wherever I travel a lot on different speaking engagements. I'll always meet people. Oh, you're the Yiscah that led the sit 2 weeks ago, or that. So the name is, I feel I'm part of, like, birds of a feather flock together. And it's a very highly respectable and needed way of connecting to our fellow Jews and beyond, I also would say, to other human beings. And this is a Shechianu moment. It's a sacred moment. To paraphrase Heschel, the living a spiritual life is less about amassing information and more about encountering sacred moments. This is a sacred moment for me, with you, Josh, with all of the listeners, with the support of the people that are helping this. Wow, Shechianu v'kimanu v'giyanu l'zman hazeh.
Amen.
All right. So to answer your first question, so I thought about this, and it's really there's an A, B, and C. The A part is when I came into more observant Judaism. We're talking now in the 1970s. 1974 actually is when I started observing Shabbat. I was really seeking a sense of closeness and an imminent, visceral experience with God. I was brought up by Jewish parents on Long Island, and while we were not observant of a lot of the halachot, it was a home that believes in God. So I was not looking to believe in God. That I wanted to taste the experience. And for various reasons, that brought me into the what I call ultra-Orthodox world of Chabad Lubavitch in Crown Heights. At the same time, I was going for a master's degree in Jewish Ed at JTS in New York, but like I don't do anything like most people do, so that was like my square peg in a round hole. And I started to adopt. I did receive my degree, but I stayed with Chabad for many years, for about 16 years, and I began to realize that. First of all, my questions were not being answered. This is to no one's discredit. There was no one was malicious. It's how I experienced the ultra-Orthodox world. It was heavily more about doing than being. And this is before I adopted spiritual practices and started learning that. But that's really what I was seeking. And I left that world after about 15, 16 years. I took a leave of absence from traditional Judaism. I needed to chill out and realize that this was like, how did I get here? This is not what I came into this more observant world for. So I took a leave of absence. And when I knew it was the right time to return, and I say now, I've been returning for the past 20 years. It's more in a renewal, like a Reb Zalman, very influenced by Reb Zalman's teachings and Hillel Zeitlin and Heschel, some of the giants and the PSS and the Rebbe from Warsaw during the interwar period. It's more of a post-denominational space where I like to see myself, or I do see myself, where a piece of me is in all the movements, but the bigger part of me is in no movement. It's in God's movement, the Creator's movement. So that brought me back into a very different way, more about being than doing. And that's when I started to adopt spiritual practices, mindfulness, contemplative practices. And it included, to a large degree, exploring the PSS and the Rebbe, Rabbi Kalanimus Kalma Shapira, may the memory of a tzaddik be for a blessing, who was murdered in Chernivtsi concentration death camp in 1943. His seven books, though, have profoundly influenced my choices in how I move ahead in this amazing journey called being Jewish. That led me to a Poland trip, and this is the third piece of the answer, to go with David Bernstein, who is the then dean of Pardes. Each year in January, he takes a group of students and faculty on this heritage tour to Poland. And that year, I asked him if he never did it before, would he consider, when we go to the Warsaw Jewish Cemetery, if we could visit the family plot of the PSS and the Rebbe. His wife, his mother, and son were buried there. He himself was murdered, like I mentioned before, and his body's in a mass grave. However, his family was there, and I really felt it was paying homage to my Rebbe, to the person who really helped me be returning to Judaism, both intellectually through the Chassidut and emotionally through his practices. So there I am with a group, and David said, "Sure, I've never been there before. And now with you here, I'll find something new." So we found the area where his family plot was, and there it is, raining and cold. It's a January, like everything you can imagine Poland to be in January, it was. And I'm like riding high, like, oh my gosh, this is the closest I could get. And I noticed on the tombstone of his wife, he acknowledges as a Hasidic Rebbe to the public that his wife was his chavruta. Every day they learned Zohar together, and she was his editor for all his manuscripts. Like he wanted the world to know this. I started tearing up. And while I was tearing up, I heard this voice, and it's a deep inner voice, and it was him. I mean, I never heard him speak, but I imagine it was his voice, or it was the divine voice saying, okay, Yiscah, you're going back to Jerusalem, to Yerushalayim. It's time to write your book.
Mm. Wow.
Yeah, you can no longer just keep this for yourself. You need to share it.
Wow.
So I left Israel, going to Poland, not knowing I was going to write a book. This was 3.5 years ago. I came back, and as Rebecca, who was there at the time, mentioned earlier, I was like, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write a book.
Wow. That's an amazing story. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, all right, so let's talk about the book a little bit now. You're very generous in quoting my book, but yours is much prettier. Um, and so, which is no knock to Joanne Fink. She did a beautiful cover on my book. I don't mean to, that's not what I meant. Anyway, it's only, yeah, not l'ganai, only l'shevach, only to praise yours. Anyway,
Amen.
so, uh, but I remember that in the introduction in my book, I called it "What Makes This Book of Torah Portion Essays Different from All Other Parsha Books," right? And so I'm curious, that's a question I have, like for you is, I got, and you probably have dozens, of weekly Torah portion books by Hasidic Rebbes and by lots of other people. Um, so, uh, I mean, I have my answer, but I want to hear yours. Like, what makes this book different?
The great question. And actually, when I submitted my proposal to JPS and also University of Nebraska Press, who is now the main publisher of 5 smaller publishing houses, so it's with the imprint of JPS, the contract, though, was the University of Nebraska Press. And the format that JPS presents to a potential author of theirs that they would publish includes many questions. And one of them is exactly that. What makes your book unique? And are there any books out there that yours is similar to? So I singled out your book because you had just released your book, and I scooped it right up, and I like, wow, this is like my idea, but mine's a little bit different. And that's how I'll answer the question. First of all, as comparing it to your book and just in general, I have a very wide target audience.
Mhm.
It's like when I read your book and other partial books, whether it's in Hebrew or in English, it's usually catered to Chevre that's in that shlav, so to speak, in that group, in that kehillah. And part of what I was pushing back on, which was my way of healing from being very distracted when I was in the ultra orthodox world, is it's more like a this than a like that.
Mhm.
And following and echoing Yeshayahu's prophecy to be an or legoyim, well, how can I be an or legoyim if I keep it just for my chevre? So I knew I wanted a wider target audience, both a Jewish audience and non-Jewish audience, both a learned and a non-learned, more, of course, in general to people who are more spiritually sensitive, but not only because it's through a university press and it fits into 3 different departments in undergraduate programs. So that was also part of my audience. And it's also for leaders and for people who want to cultivate something in solitude. So it's more in the public domain and in the private domain. That's one way. So my target audience was very this, which affected how I wrote it, of course, in terms of not assuming anything about the wider audience. Yes, the second difference is it has to do with discovering a seed. Like I'm asking the reader to imagine that they're like a spiritual gardener. Like I take each reader on a journey. So, and that's actually affected the cover. JPS and I and UNP, we've all presented different covers, but none of us liked each other's choices. And then when this cover came up from Joy, the managing editor at JPS, she said, I think I found it. It's like Yiscah's garden that she talks about in Yerushalayim, and there's movement, and that's the idea of a garden. So I take the reader on a journey that they describe, that they define, that they discover. I'm like the tour guide. I'm like the madricha, so to speak. So that makes the book stands out in that unique way, I believe. And it's discovering the midah of godly consciousness in 47 different ways. Even though there were 54 parshiot, I had to make the decision, do I do 54 or 47? This is where less is more because of the word limitation from JPS. So there were 47 seeds. And that type of a metaphor contributes to the book being unique. Also, what I believe contributes to the book being unique, based on my studies of a lot of Parsha, I did not want to write another book about Parshat HaShavua, and it's not about Parshat HaShavua. I extract from each Parshat HaShavua a specific midah, which I call a seed, to help raise God consciousness. But I also include the Peshat, a lot of the medieval commentators that support what I believe to be, and that's my argument, the midah, and then the Hasidic and Neo-Hasidic commentaries, which also support in a deeper, it's called each parsha. Each portion has a section called a deeper dive, and that's where I contribute that. And then I have my own Torah to really support all the above. And then I move into, so that's more of the intellectual, beginning to kind of be a little bit more intellectual to the emotional. And then each week there's a practice similar to what you offer. The practice, though, it begins always with a contemplative practice based on the Pia Setzner, but then it leads into a visualization of that midah. And that's the book coming more into the heartfelt or the holistic approach of mind, body, heart, soul.
Yeah.
So that's
I really love the structure and the consistency of it, and the simplicity of the practice was also really, I mean, as you said, it's just the accessibility piece of it is really just comes through. So yeah, as far as I'm concerned, if those were your three goals, you nailed them, from everything I can tell. So but I want to pick up on one thing that you just mentioned, which was about gardening, right? So the title of the book is Planting Seeds of the Divine, right? And then the subtitle is Torah commentaries to cultivate your spiritual practice. So, cultivate is another, gardening word. And then throughout you have this, you really weave this theme of gardening and seeds, as you say. And of course, and in the introduction, and also when you're teaching on the daily sit, you often talk about your garden, at your home where you host that, Shabbat morning minyan, and etc. And so I'd love to just ask you, like, what does gardening represent for you, and why is it such a significant through line in your approach to Torah?
Such a sacred question. And to quote Heschel again, it really is radically amazing. I guess deep inside, one of my biggest disappointments about having lived in the ultra-Orthodox world, it became boring. It became too predictable. Every question I ever had seemed to have an answer, but none of the answers resonated with me. There was such a black and white way of living. And at the same time, and this was as I'm returning back, that was in the back of my mind. I wanted my Judaism to be radically amazing. People even asked me the way I talk about living in Israel or my Judaism, like, did you just start like observing mitzvot? Or like, did you just make aliyah? Why? Because I'm passionate, because I'm excited about my Judaism. And I look for moments of radical amazement through my day. And that was part of coming back to the tradition. I was seeking that out. Alongside that, not where I'm living now, in Nachlaot, in another apartment in Nachlaot, the section in Yerushalayim where I live, I bought a few pots. Everyone has pots of plants. I mean, Israel is a big gardening country. And I bought a few pots, and I was paying attention in my mindfulness approach to how I try to live much of the day. I noticed differences as they were growing, as some were dying. I got another pot. I did this. I took that out. I put that in. And I really started to work with the garden, with what became eventually a garden. Then I moved to a much larger home with larger property, and one led to the next. And as some of you who are listening, I believe, have been to my garden, I know Rebecca has. And however it was 2 years ago, 3 years ago, it's a lot different now.
Mm.
And that's where I see my Judaism.
Mm.
Each morning I go into the garden at about 6 o'clock when the birds in the winter, in the summer actually wake me up. That's my alarm. I hear the birds. I go in with my first cup of coffee and I literally go around and say good morning to all my fruit trees, my plants, the colors, the textures. And I see nuance. It's so nuanced. It's so subtle. I see the beginning of a new iris. I see the beginning of a new fruit in my lemon tree. Because I do this every day, it's part of my mindful practice. I experience the divine in my life, which is
Mm.
what I was seeking in the 70s. I was seeking this connective closeness with the divine presence, and I see it and experience it in my garden.
Mm.
It's never the same. Even in the winter when it's raining, I don't stay out there long, but I do go out to say, and I literally say Boker Tov. And to show you how this is really a part of my life, one time when I was leaving a nursery, I had bought some new plants and I was waiting for the bus. There was another woman next to me who also had just come from the nursery. And I asked her, Geveret, let's say it in English, I have a question. You look like you have a lot of plants. You see, I have a lot of plants. Do you talk to your garden every morning? She said, "Bara, behechlet. Of course I do." So like those of us who like we get taken by it, it's like a relationship. And when people come into my garden, this one woman came in about a year ago. She didn't say, "What a beautiful garden," or "You must do a lot of work." She said, "I feel I'm walking into a place where everything here feels loved by you."
Mm.
And I love my creator. My Judaism is a Torah of love, of compassion, of connection. And that's the garden. And even I have a gardener who helps me with some of the heavy pruning or the heavy work. He said, if you could see under the ground, if you just like if you could scuba dive, but under the ground, you would see all the roots interacting and like really supporting each other. The
Mm.
diversity supporting each other rather than excluding each other. I said, this is my Torah. My
Mm.
Torah is a Torah of connection, of support, of empathy, of everything we do at IJS and where I teach at Pardes and AJS. And as the PSS, the Rebbe, and I'll conclude on this note, in his writings, in B'nai Machshava Tova, he actually says every plant has a nefesh. Not even like the Arizal said in the 16th century, everything, even a rock, has a nitzotz, a spark of God. But the PSS writes in the 20th century, every plant has a nefesh. And that's my point of connection with other Jews, with other humans, and with everything in my garden. It's the connection. And in that, I expand consciousness rather than diminish or limit consciousness. And what I love about my garden and my Torah is never predictable.
Mhm.
From day to day, I may have an idea all of a sudden, and I'm open to that. And
Mm.
that's the garden.
Wow. Wow. Right. And, it makes me think of my grandfather, alav shalom, was a tremendous gardener, lived in Minneapolis. And every year he would plant 3,000 impatiens. He had a house on Lake Minnetonka and he had a greenhouse and everything. Anyway, so I grew up with these memories. And his name was Chaim. His name was Jaime. And so at his funeral, I gave one of the eulogies, and I remember talking about how it was such a fitting name, right, for this man who's a gardener and who's really like he's like Adam in Gan Eden. I mean, like he's in, it's that's our original context. That's where we're supposed to be, is in a
Yes.
garden, right? So amazing. All right. I've got a couple more questions, and I want to encourage folks, if you have questions, again, just to send them to Q&A in the chat. Just find it in the chat, and we will try to get to those in just a couple of minutes. But I got a couple more questions for you, Yiscah. So one of the most striking things I found about the book is that while you have been very public about your personal journey vis-a-vis gender identity, in this book, that's really not a major theme, or maybe to put it more accurately, it seems like it's part of a much larger theme of finding your home in Torah and Jewish life in the universe. That strikes me as a pretty deliberate choice. And I mean, maybe that's a false assumption, so you can tell me. No, yeah, whatever. No, I didn't notice. But I have a feeling that was a deliberate choice. Really? So
What a coincidence.
give you a chance to talk more about that.
Okay. Well, I feel comfortable talking about that in this context. I usually don't actually, but I'm never asked that question either. So this is my answer. Again, I do everything in parts. There's the external and the internal. The more obvious answer to that, well, yes, it was with intent. It was with intent. And the more external or apparent reason that I have for me is enough already. I wrote a memoir published 11 years ago. I gave a TED Talk. A whole documentary was made in Israel by Yes Doco. That's the Yes cable channel, the documentary series. All right, how much can I keep talking about me? I want to talk about my scholarship and my research and my ideas. So the world has a lot of that part of my life. I feel I don't need to add to it. And I don't feel called when I check in with the boss, so to speak. I don't feel in my contemplative practice that I'm called to. It was an amazing one, probably the most important personal, life-changing decision I made, but I made it from a place of pain. It was an obstacle for me. It was part of my surviving, not my thriving, and it's my past, and it's over. And the result of it will last me and carry me ad mea ka'esrim, many healthy, I hope, years as I hopefully will grow old gracefully as I age. But what a lot of people don't realize is this created this gender identity dysphoria from way back at like 5 years old, created a major, major obstacle for me in trying to integrate into a traditional world. It wasn't because of the gender, it was because of the gender identity dysphoria. There were three strands that really were in conflict with each other because of that, which really didn't have to be. One is honoring my true inner being. I thought that was like fundamental in cultivating a Jewish identity. And I didn't do that out of shame, out of feeling alone. This was like, I was born in 1951, not 2011 or 21. So I thought whatever I was suffering, and it was suffering. I want to be really clear. I know today's climate is very different. This is my experience. It was nothing but pain for most of my life. It was always an obstacle because I was raised by parents who cultivated and taught us about truth and being honest. And here I was not, with a major way that we identify each other by in all cultures. But secondly, specific to Judaism, I wanted to honor my tradition. And I felt I couldn't. And I wanted to honor my spiritual yen, my need to connect to God. And I remember going to the Kotel when I lived in the old city when my children were younger, and we say on Shabbat, like purify our hearts so we could be with you in truth. And I would say, well, God, if you're really there, you know that this is ridiculous because I'm not living a life of truth. And if you're not there, well, what am I doing this for? And that's part of the reason I left that world. So that's the micro. What I've moved into is the macro of creating now a shiluv, a beautiful braid of honoring with integrity my inner being, honoring with integrity my soul, honor with integrity my tradition. And now that brought me to a place of a macro, of a thriving, not surviving, of being very much in the present. There are days and days that go by. I forgot I even transitioned because it's like just the way I forgot my second grade. Actually, I didn't forget my second grade teacher's name, Mrs. Gadamer. Don't know why I remember it, but there are things in my past I just don't remember. And there are days that go by, and then something happens. oh, that's right, I transitioned. It's so not a part of my identity today. This book is this is who I am today. And I want to, in the spirit of IJS,
Yeah.
as I seek to cultivate mindfulness, I don't want to live in the past, but I honor it. I honor my past. It humbles me. It's just not, though, it doesn't inform my present.
Mm.
Now, there's a deeper reason, though. And this is, I'll share it with all of you. I hesitate to say this, but I wouldn't be fully honest in answering your question. I was not prepared for the world, the world out there, to strip away every part of who I am other than transgender. It's like I'm no longer a parent, I'm no longer a grandparent, I'm no longer a teacher, I'm no longer an author, I'm no longer an Israeli, I'm no longer even a woman. I'm no longer anything. I am one big embodiment of transgenderism. It is so hurtful. It is so disrespectful that, and I can't change the world. I mean, I am trying to change the world through a different means, through consciousness raising. But that's the main reason why I was invited just recently to speak at the North American Federation LGBTQ conference that came to Israel. Aside from the fact that I'm here in New York, I said, I don't address that anymore. It's not, I turned down lots of invitations because, and maybe some of you, and I'm taking a risk. Yeah, when this closes, when we close out the Zoom room, I'm taking a risk that even in this community, and right now there are 221 in the room, I don't know if someone's going to see me only as a transgender. And I'm not. I don't even I was before my transition. I don't identify. I identify as someone, not cisgender, but as a woman with a lot of complexity, a lot of different hats. I mean, when I'm playing on the floor with magnetiles with my grandchildren, that's not a transgender, that's a softa. When I'm speaking before, an audience like this, that's a scholar talking about her book. When I participate in community meetings in Nachlaot, I'm a community member. When my students at Pardes come for Shabbat and love my cooking, I'm a cook. I'm a homemaker. I'm a gardener. Why should all that be dismissed?
Wow. Thank you.
So
And thank you for, thank you for your willingness to share that here. Just for so everybody's clear, and this is a little secret, but all the authors get the questions in advance. So they all get to edit them first. So I asked us, would she be comfortable, with this question? So I really, and it's a real statement of your trust and feeling of belonging in this community that you're willing to share that. And what
yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, one more question from me, and then looks like we got a couple of questions so far in the queue, and if anybody more you want to send in, please do. So finally, this isn't really a question, it's an invitation. So this week's, I mean, it's a Parsha book. We couldn't let it go by without you teaching a little bit. So this week's Parsha, of course, is Ba'alotcha, and your essay for this week is, I think, particularly moving. You write about the institution of Pesach Sheni, the makeup Passover, right, for people who are unable to do it at its regular time. And that leads you into some, I think, a really powerful personal reflection on second chances. And so I want to just invite you to read part of it. I think it's from the top of page 189.
Yes.
All right.
Now, what I'm going to share with the reader is not common for every portion. It's when it's relevant. So here, in my reflecting on the commentaries that I bring down, I write the following. Oh, this is so exciting. I get to read from my book to IJS with Josh. That's amazing. For 15 years, I lived in the ultra-Orthodox world. For me, the very clear expectations of how I was to think and behave eventually felt like they were robbing me of my inner truth. I couldn't express my critical thinking or emotional experiences or honor my yen to experiment and explore. I yearned to live a life that would honor the Jewish tradition, But little by little, the energy it took to live what felt like someone else's life whittled away. In 1991, 15 years into this way of living, a traumatic realization manifested quickly. As Saddam Hussein began to launch missiles from Iraq to Israel, I, now a Jerusalemite, Yerushalmi in Hebrew, felt an inner attack. The external war was exacerbating my inner war. I had to leave this world because there was no place there for me to be honest with God, my soul, and my conscience. For the next 10 years, I lived outside the traditional Jewish way of life and faced a spiritual existential crisis. I felt stuck in no man's land. I couldn't live in the traditional Jewish Israeli world and be honest with both God and me, and yet I couldn't live outside of this world and hope to find inner serenity. I kept hoping that magically God would lead me to a way of honoring my soul, my conscience, and the tradition. On my 50th birthday in 2001, I woke up to the unbearable pain of loneliness and estrangement from my own tradition and gave myself the birthday gift of reaching out, or I would like to write now, really reaching in. It's amazing when you read your own book, you're like, oh, why didn't I just say reaching in? Reaching out to the eternal. Now, for the first time, I simply and literally begged God, and with hot tears, to help me return to traditional Judaism in a way, though, that felt alive and honest. Suddenly, spiritual ideas that I'd learned when I was ultra-Orthodox, that my soul is a part of God dwelling within me, and that God gives each of us second chances, sprung up. I willed to change my relationship with the Shekhinah because now I intuitively believed I could. It was as if my soul could talk and she was asking for a second chance to do this project called living in a better divinely connected way. What followed on that very same day was as if the eternal called out to me and said, oh, I've been waiting for you to all these years to finally cry out to me for help. Now I can help you and, of course, give you a second chance. Hold on to my hand and never let go, and you will learn to live a Judaism that you have dreamt for. Wow, I said to myself, and I felt, heard, and homeward bound for the first time in 25 years. This second chance required me to be really honest with myself. Unlike earlier in my life, now I gave permission to think creatively and critically and to open my heart to feel my true feelings. I began to experiment and to cultivate Jewish spiritual practices, to sense the divine presence. And I started to realize that I was no longer halachically, legally defined, but rather informed. Then I saw that I was embracing a radical post-denominational way of being with the divine, with the Jewish tradition, and with my own soul. And I conclude this entry by saying, from time to time, I wonder, what would have happened to me if I hadn't pleaded with God for a second chance?
Thank you. Wow. All right. That actually maybe opens up. We have a little bit of time for there's a couple of questions that have come in. So one is, I think building on that theme, could you speak, and going back to the garden for a second, could you speak a little bit about a garden in winter and maybe hope in pain? And this is from someone named Michael. So could you speak a little bit about a garden in winter and Michael adds, and hope in pain?
So, wow, what a question. Yes. So in terms of my own experience, which is not everyone's, I live in Israel, and the winters in Israel actually produce a whole array of color and like there are like my fig tree completely loses all its leaves. But the olive tree doesn't. And different flowers do not bloom in the winter. And then there are seasonal flowers that only bloom in the summer or the winter. Like I have certain flowers that when it starts to become warm, they die, the seasonal flowers, the annuals. My perennials, they grow all year, they bloom all year. So winter in Israel, in Jerusalem, I don't live in the Negev, I'm sure it's different there, but where I live in Yerushalayim, my winter, the winter there produces just different colors, different experiences of the creative presence. The larger, though, having grown up in New York, in the Northeast, with the winters, I would say how I understand, and I do see this in my fig tree. In the winter, it looks dead. It really does look dead. There's nothing. I spend 3, 4 weeks every day cleaning up the leaves. It's gotten so big that's part of the life cycle. And I have to pause and gaze at that as much. I do gaze at those parts of the garden. There's another, I don't even know the name of it, but it produces such beautiful, bright, orange reddish flowers in the summer. And in the winter, it looks dead. And I have a version of a hibiscus that, not the regular hibiscus, it's a multicolored hibiscus. It really does look dead in the winter. And that is as much inspiring for me because I see it as part of a process. It is part of the divine will. And they don't die. They just go to sleep. They hibernate. Just the way the flowers that blossom in the winter or the perennials in the winter go to sleep in the summer. Like all my bulbs, like the tulips and the daffodils. By now in Israel, they're all dead. The bulbs are alive under the ground, but you don't see anything above the ground. So the garden has taught me to Mike. Did you say his name is Mike?
Oh, Michael. Yeah.
Michael and everyone else. I see as much aliveness in what some people would see in death as I do in apparent aliveness.
So here's, I think this will be our last question. So, and this is from Henrietta, who asked, we'll end on a small question. Do you believe that human beings are all individual expressions of God? Small question.
That's the al regalachat. On one foot,
Yeah,
can you?
on the
Yeah.
doorknob issue when you're in therapy, it's like, 49 minutes into the session, I'm going to ask you the big question now.
All right. So I don't in any way want to convey an absolute clarity or dogmatic answer. Actually, it's something in the past couple of years that I have struggled probably more with than in the past. I do believe, and my belief, emunah in Hebrew is from amanut, which means art, and an artist is always developing, always whatever the art form is. I believe what I learned, the Hasidism, the Neo-Hasidism, is an art form, and I don't always have absolute clarity, but I've in the past 20 years, especially in the past 20 years, the needle of I'm more clear than not clear. Yes, that I do believe God's presence through the soul, through the breath, neshama, soul, is in every single human being. Notwithstanding, and I want to really go on record, notwithstanding that's not always easy for me to adopt, but I do deep inside, that is my belief system. Yes.
Okay. I think that's it. And we also evidently, I'm supposed to convey from Sandy, who's up in the upper left of my screen here, to let you know that she and her daughter are going to meet you in Oradell, New Jersey on June 17th. And if you're going to be on June 17th in Oradell, New Jersey, you can also meet Yiscah Smith. So, yeah.
If you go onto my website, there's a tab, there's a page of my book tour now.
Yeah. So there's a whole tour, and we are honored and delighted to be part of it. And I know we probably put the link. We already put the link in. Okay, where you can purchase the book. Highly encourage. The wonderful thing about a Parsha book is that there's no bad time to start. You can start anywhere because the tour is always every week. You got something to read. So Yiscah, thank you so much for
Mm,
writing this book, for sharing it with us, for sharing your Torah with
mm,
us, and for being here tonight and sharing
mm.
yourself with us tonight. Thank you so much.
Amazing, amazing, radically amazing. Toda, toda lekulchem.
Thank you. We'll bring Rebecca back.
Wow. What a beautiful, beautiful discussion. Thank you so much to both of you, Josh and Yiscah, for this meaningful and wonderful conversation. Also want to just thank Rachel Huggett and Molly Easton from the IJS team supporting us behind the scenes and assisting in this program tonight. And thank you to everyone for coming together to be a part of this beautiful event. We hope that you will plan on joining us again soon, and really looking forward to seeing you next time. Sending blessings to everyone.